Initiating satellite scan. Camera deployed. Link established.
GeekCastRadio.com presents
Satellite coming down in 3, 2, 1.
War Stories 2.0, a fanfiction podcast in the style of old-style radio. Listen in to hear exclusive, awesome stories submitted to us for your listening pleasure.
Welcome to duty.
And now, your host, Steve Megatron Phillips.
Hello, and welcome to War Stories 2.0. For those that don't know, this was the original podcast that debuted myself, Steve Megatron Phillips. I was first formed on, I first joined this podcast, the original one, on tfwire.com, which got promptly canceled after 15 episodes due to inactivity. So, being that this was my founding show, I decided to recreate it for Geekcast Radio, which originally I was going to have it for Predacon Empire, but alas, it has joined the network. So, for those unfamiliar, or those familiar, I'm going to read the original premise, which was written by Matrix Prime, for the most part. It says the War Stories podcast has to do with old-fashioned radio. Mostly it's going to cover Transformers-related stuff. I might delve into things such as, like, maybe, I don't know, I'm a big one into the Batman right now, as well as possibly certain G.I. Joe, I don't know. Like, if it were to feature Cobra, I could probably try it. I don't have a clue. So for right now, I'm going to just do Transformers. If I get sent something else, that would be awesome too. I would probably still do it. Right off the bat, I'm going to state the email address that you can send this to. It would be podcast@PredaconEmpire.com, or you can go to PredaconEmpire.com/Nexus. And there's an area called The Mechanic, which is for fan art, fan fiction, customs, and whatnot. So that would be the place to post it, and then just make sure you give permission with the story, and also state that you want it read on War Stories. As I said, it is fan fiction. I will be doing the narration and the character voices. If there's anything that anybody would like to add on, at some point, like add, I don't know, their idea or why they came up with this story, I would be happy to post that in front of me reading the clip. I will do my voice talents, I will do character voices as well as narration, and I promise not to bore the hell out of you like I did in the original War Stories. I've come a long way in the last 2 years of doing podcasting, and I've gotten a lot more enthusiastic, as well as not as bland and boring when I'm reading. So, alas, after 15 episodes, that show retired in June of 2008. Being that we're coming up on May, I figured what better time to relaunch War Stories than almost 2 years later. So, I did get a submission. And although I did not state that I was going to start this podcast yet, it gives me the perfect motivation to do so. So stay tuned after this.
In a world, there, I said it, happy.
First up today is a story by David Ellis called I Remembered, which is a Defensor spotlight. The quick summary of it is, Defensor wakes up from stasis following a battle, and his memory of the Protectobots' actions leads to an unexpected decision.
Help me! It hurts. You got to. Can't move my.
Perceptor's voice filtered into the blackness.
Piers, he's coming back online. Defensor, can you hear me?
Defensor's mind eased out of defensive stasis, the equivalent of a blackout. Automatically, he ran a diagnostic on his gestalt body. "Save your processes, please," Perceptor urged. "You'd gone into stasis after receiving heavy damage. I am still in the process of investigating why you did not separate into your component Protectobots instead. In point of fact, your mind seems to have erected barriers to prevent the separation from—" "I remembered." Perceptor fell silent, surprised, but only for a moment. "Please, elaborate if possible." Defensor looked around at his surroundings. He was lying on his back in one of the immense storage bays of the Autobot stronghold known as Metroplex. Perceptor's laboratory equipment had been moved in. His lab and other such facilities had clearly been too small for a combined Autobot. His gaze rested on Ultra Magnus, the Autobot's second-in-command, who had been observing from a distance. "Do you need more time to answer?" Magnus asked. "No. I recalled memories from the Protectobots, from before they formed me." Magnus considered this. "Could you describe them?" "They were violent, chaotic. Victims were screaming, trapped begging for their lives, and the Protectobots didn't care." "They didn't?" Defensor searched his memories. "Blades, specifically. He only wanted the Combaticons." Magnus's optics brightened with interest. "At the expense of human life, you mean?" "Yes. I remember his words and the intensity of his emotions." "Your memories of your component Protectobots should be limited, at best," Perceptor pointed out, unable to resist injecting his input. "Mnemonic buffers are in place to protect you, the gestalt form, from experiencing sensory overload." Magnus tried to keep the discussion in plain language. "In other words, Perceptor, when the Protectobots form Defensor, he only recalls the most basic information he needs for the situation." "That is an accurate assessment, yes." Perceptor turned to Defensor. "Your memory of specific dialogue and emotions is something of an anomaly." Defensor was silent, processing this. "Anomaly or not," he stated, finally, "I cannot deny it happened, or the loss of life that resulted." Both Magnus and Perceptor noticed the sadness in the combined Autobot's voice and glanced at each other, concerned. "Would it be possible for you to suppress those memories?" Magnus asked. "Absolutely," Perceptor answered immediately. "I have a device that will perform such a task. Combiner technology has come a long way since the Constructicons created Devastator. I would initiate the procedure immediately." Magnus nodded and turned to Defensor. "Is that what you want?" After a long pause, Defensor shook his head. "No, I wish to remember everything." "So, let me get this straight," Rodimus Prime declared hours later as he and Ultra Magnus stood atop Metroplex, watching Earth's sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky red. "Defensor accessed all of the Protectobots' memories of the Combaticon fight." "Yes, sir," Magnus replied. "And because he didn't agree with the priorities of one or two of them, he's refusing to separate?" He's adamant about it. He sees no other way to prevent further loss of life." "But this never happened before," Rodimus argued. "What's going to happen to Hotspot, Blade, Streetwise, Groove, and First Aid?" "According to Perceptor, they'll stop being individuals." "We can't afford this. The Protectobots are too important to us, Separately and combined, Rodimus Prime watched the sky darken. This war with the Decepticons, it's an arms race, and we rarely stop to consider the long-term ramifications. And you've reached the end of the story. Stay tuned after this. Thank you for listening to War Stories. If you'd like to hear your story read on a future show, head on over to PredaconEmpire.com/Nexus and post it along with your permission. Submissions can also be accepted via email at podcast@PredaconEmpire.com. The preceding story is not endorsed by anyone, and it remains a copyright of their respective authors. All stories within this podcast are used with permission from the author. This has been a GeekCastRadio.com production, and this is Steve/Megatron, signing off in the words of Optimus Prime.
Get out of the car.
Welcome to duty.